I got a call from the Department of Justice to help with a possible rescue in early 2021. We started working with the Department of Justice to try to figure out a way that we could get all 68 big cats from Jeff Lowe's facility, the Tiger King Park.
Okay, well, I should probably start with when we unloaded Priscilla. It was oh wow. This one's definitely pregnant. So we had that already in mind. Got video cameras ready, provided her extra vitamins, bedding, things like that, so we could video and watch her in the den, kind of knew the signs to look for, and then it was only 12 days, and wow, there's some babies in there.
There you go. There you go. Looky there.
Well, we did know that we were possibly rescuing 4 pregnant females, and of course that's a little overwhelming.
I wasn't physically on the rescue myself, but I saw pictures while they were doing the loading, and I remember seeing her, and it's hard, because they're carnivores. They don't really show signs of pregnancy because they try to hide it until they're ready to pop. And she definitely looked like she was ready to pop. So she was the one out of all of the females that I saw, and I don't want to say I knew because I didn't know for sure, but you looked at her and you were like, she's pregnant.
The thoughts were, we'll just keep an eye on them and see what they're doing. And then the next thought was, is this going to be just a ton of work? Because a lot of these cats, their cubs are just ripped away from the mothers. And so do they even know how to be a mom? Will instinct take over and they'll raise these cubs themselves?
So Priscilla gave birth Thursday morning of the 20th of May. We kind of suspected that it was going to happen as the night before she was no longer interested in food, and that tends to be a good sign that they're about to give birth. We were following AZA guidelines on how to allow a tiger to raise her own cubs. We are a non-breeding facility. This is very much new territory for us, but we knew from the get-go that we wanted her to be the ones to raise these cubs.
The coolest thing was seeing them, she hadn't even cleaned them and was in the process of cleaning them, and so
being a new addition to our family here, she was only 12 days after rescue, and she was giving birth. So we were really worried about her stress level, because that's asking a lot of a female tiger. So we closed her area off. No one was allowed down there except for senior staff and the veterinarian.
And so we thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, she's gonna do this. She's going to be a mom, and it makes our job great and a lot easier, so we thought. And we were, I forget how many days in, we started to notice their legs.
So the first couple of days, only about 2-3 times a day was she being checked on, and every time we'd go down there and make sure they were nursing and everything seemed to be going well. It wasn't until day 4, it was actually my first time getting to see her since I had been off. I went down to view her, and I didn't even notice it at first when I was looking in at her, but I took my phone out to get video. This day and age, that's great for your medical records. And I took some video because I was lucky enough to see one of the cubs stopped nursing and crawled up to mom to see her, and then crawled back. And it was actually at that time that we noticed that we were going to have some huge problems in our future. At that point, we didn't exactly know what was going on, but the most likely diagnosis would have been what they have, which is called flexural tendon contracture. And basically what I saw was this little tiny baby cub. Her hind limbs were behind her, and her ankles were actually stuck up under her. Colloquially, it's known as club foot. They also call it twisted leg syndrome. So that kind of gives you a description of what we were seeing, but she basically was dragging her back end behind her. When you come up with a treatment plan, you're looking for research to follow that has been documented, scientifically proven to work. And unfortunately, especially in veterinary medicine, that's not always the case. In this particular instance, going through the literature, there were no reported instances of tigers that were treated for flexural tendon contracture. Not to say that it couldn't happen, and I'm sure in a lot of these breeding facilities, because they're seeing a lot of cubs, they probably do see this. I found another condition that was kind of similar to flexural tendon contracture that they see a lot in snow leopards. It's known as swimmer's syndrome. It's kind of the opposite, where their legs are actually splayed out as opposed to contracted in. But the idea is kind of the same as far as treatment to get them using their hind legs and strengthening those hind legs. And I say hind legs, it can affect any limb. In our case, our cubs, it was all of their hind limbs. So taking from that, while also at this point, because there wasn't anything in the research, I had to look at anecdotal information, and I found a couple websites out there that, obviously you have to be aware that anyone can put anything on the internet, but it seems like a reputable website that had lots of examples, and the information was sound. When I was reading it, it made sense. So I pulled from that, from domestic house cats, and I pulled from what was reported in the snow leopards with the swimmer syndrome, and came up with a treatment plan between the two of those. We knew no matter what, we had a long road ahead of us. That's basically what I learned from the information I was pulling. We had to start very early. We had to start very aggressively about it if we wanted these cubs to have a normal life. And that was our main goal, because unfortunately euthanasia was very much on the table with how severe their condition was.
Yeah, it was, well, Priscilla was for sure a challenge. She was very scared when she got here. When you rescue any animal, you never know what their past was or who may have hurt them. We kind of knew the past for her, and obviously she had a really big problem with men, we soon came to realize, very much a distrust. So distrust with a tiger is aggression. And that's a very scary thing when you're, kind of asking permission to take these cubs and bring them back every day. And you have to have a trust. And so we would have to shift her and lock her away from them. And we just did a lot of talking to her, like, we're going to bring them back. We'll be right back. Knowing that in her past, she's definitely had cubs, and they were taken from her and never returned. So it's just a risk we had to take, because they certainly couldn't live in the form that they were. So we had to, we started bringing her treats even before we pulled the cubs, just a few times a day, just bringing her down a little bowl of red meat cut up or chicken cut up to just, reinforce that trust, so that she knew no one was going to hurt her or those cubs. And we also did this.
So we did have to wait until they were about 4 weeks of age, which was hard because you just wanted to get in there right away. But again, we're trying to have the dam raise the cubs. And if we went a little earlier or way earlier, we might have lost that trust in her. So, we kept them as comfortable in the den with a lot of straw to keep them fluffed up so they're not dragging their legs on concrete, and did what we could to keep them comfortable in the meantime. Once we got to around 4 weeks and the dam was separating herself from them more often, we went ahead and did their initial exams and pulled them for that first day to start physical therapy from the get-go.
And I was scared to death. It was such a scary thought that she wouldn't accept the cubs back. But after a couple times, and she allowed us, and there might have been one day in there or two that she didn't want us to take the cub, so we just weren't able to do therapy that day. But I was so impressed with her ability to be a mother, and I was so proud that the animals got all the nutrients that they needed because they were able to nurse from her. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience to be able to do that, because that's not always the case with big cats.
What we did, basically, we brought them in around 9 that morning, did their physical exams, did x-rays, basically wanted to confirm that my suspicion was correct, that we are dealing with flexural tendon contracture. And then from there, we started the therapy. What it consisted of was about 10 to 15 minutes of warm water massage and compression. So what we really wanted to do was soften the area up. So the diagnosis of flexural tendon contracture, what you're looking at there is basically any limb could be affected, one or multiple, even all four. And you're dealing with a joint that is rigid. If you think of your joints, you have muscles that connect to those bones that make up the joint via tendons. And your tendons, with those muscles and the joint space and the bones, is what allows you to extend and flex your limbs. What happened with these cubs and in animals with this condition is those muscles, those tendons, those ligaments that all are involved in that flexion of the joint have become super stiff, and they've contracted way down to the point where the joint is immobile. And the goal of therapy is to break down those muscles, those tendons, ligaments, and get them stretched out and get them flexible and get them moving again. And the cause, unfortunately, at this point, we have no idea what the cause is. There's been plenty of speculation as to whether it has to do with nutrition of the dam, genetics, inbreeding, just positioning in utero, but no one really knows. There's never been scientifically proven as to what's causing it, which is unfortunate because you want to be able to prevent it in the future, but we honestly aren't sure. So at this point, all we can do is try to fix it once it's already happened. So what we did with their treatment plan to start with is a warm water massage and compression. Warm water and compression of the area is great at really stretching and helping those muscles relax and getting those tendons loose so that they can be stretched even further. The warmth of it helps to bring blood to the area and really provide lots of nutrients and heat to help, again, stretch those muscles. So anytime we were doing any therapy, we always wanted to start with that to get them all warmed up, basically. So we do that for about 10 to 15 minutes. The next step after that was just working that joint space. So we would do holds. So it was their hind limbs, so it was their ankles that were contracted in. So we would literally just try to get that ankle up as far as they would let us, and then we would push a little bit more even to get that stretch. So, it's a slow process because you want to go, in the beginning we could only go so far and then stretch a little bit. And that stretch is going to be a bit painful. If you've ever stretched yourself, and you'll know, it takes a lot to work those. So the cubs were a little uncomfortable at times, but it's what we needed to keep them, to save them, basically. So we did holds. After that, we would do movements. Again, kind of the same idea, working those joints. We would do range of motion, so we would work the joint and the leg, the entire leg, all the joints in the leg through that. We did a lot of placement exercises once they got it flexed enough where we could get their feet under them. Because prior to that, those paw pads never touched the ground, so we had to work to get those to where they could at least sit under them. And then it was really about strengthening those legs up. As we progressed over the 2 months, the treatment plan changed a lot. There was a lot of adding things, taking away things. A lot of the physical therapy came after that first week once we actually got to a point where they could kind of stand on their own. And then we got to, walking. We built a contraption, a ramp that we could have them use as a support to walk down, walk up, walk through. there's a lot of stance. We want them to just stand, just in the proper position. And then once we're finished with all those exercises and stretching and all of that, the next big component of the therapy was splinting. So we needed to splint those limbs and that joint into the proper position. We couldn't let them just sit there in the incorrect position. So what we would usually do in the beginning, we'd take the cubs, we'd do the exercises, we'd splint them. We had to use little finger splints at that point because they were so tiny. They'd go back to mom because they were still too young to stay away from her for too long. And then we'd take them back for a second session in that day, work them again, and then splint them overnight. Eventually, after about a week to 2 weeks, when they became of an age where she was leaving them more, and we could hold them for a number of hours without worrying about them not eating as much, which was about 6 weeks of age. We actually would bring them here at 9. We'd do our warm water therapy, we'd do our stretches, we'd do our exercises, and then we would splint them and keep them here, and then redo all over again at 2 o'clock, and then send them home. Usually at that point we wouldn't splint while they were with mom. That way they'd get a little bit of a break, and we were just worried about mom taking the splints off or potentially eating them or them eating it. It was a lot of give and take there. But it tended to work well. We did see major improvements in one cub who actually started off the worse within a month. The other two took more time, which was actually what was expected. In those other cases I was telling you about, the anecdotal information and the research, it always said usually at least 2 months, if not 3 months, to really get them out of this condition and get them to a spot where they were strong enough that they wouldn't require therapy anymore. We were also racing against the clock of when they got too big. That's the other problem, domestic house cat, and even snow leopards. They don't get quite as big, quite as strong as a tiger. And we knew once they, hit 40, 50 pounds, it was going to become way too dangerous to work with them. So we were racing against the clock as well.
At first, we started doing it, and they're small, so, and squirmy though, and they cried a lot, and it was emotionally draining, knowing that we had to continue doing this a few times a day, and as they grew, even before they grew, we needed other team members to come in as well and hold them, so that we could actually do the therapy on their legs and massages. And so it took, every session took 9 people, and that was to do like a 20-minute session. And then of course, as it progressed, Dr. Kellen wanted to do more and more sessions. And so when certain people weren't available, it took even longer, sometimes up to an hour and a half. It just depended on the day and what team members were available. But I mean, people came from our education team and communications team and lodging, and our treasurer and our president and vice president. Just everyone came to maintenance, helped even if you could just have hands holding them so that we could do what their legs needed for the therapy. So it was a massive team effort. Anytime anybody had the times that we set for therapy, it was like, please just show up and give us a hand. Well, the therapy increased and increased and increased each day. So we finally got to the point where Priscilla had enough trust in us as well she kind of just was already away from the cubs in the morning, like they were waiting for the bus stop. And we were able to keep them all day. But as they grew, obviously they got stronger. So it got even harder to hold them down. And that's when Dr. Kellen discovered also, and we had seen it at the beginning as well, but they both, Jinx and Dodge, had tumor type growths in their eye that Dr. Kellen needed to remove. So with all of this, they also needed another surgery, which is a scary thing in itself, knowing that what they were already going through. And so she was able to successfully do that. At the same time, we're still involved in a court case, so anything that we needed to do for these cubs or any of the animals of this rescue had to be approved by the Department of Justice before we could move forward. And in fact, Jinx and Dodge, from our last exam, are cryptorchids, so they're going to need another surgery here in the next few months to be able to neuter them properly. And then they started getting really rowdy and feeling good. And again, it really took a team because they were so strong. It was really hard to hold them down to do this therapy. At the same time, you know, you feel horrible. Your heart hurts for them, but then you start seeing progress and they're walking and they're actually standing up on those legs. Well, then they started playing on those legs and wrestling around with each other, and then Jinx jumped and hurt one of his feet, and so we had to do a different type of therapy with him, which was a different session all in itself. So time was definitely full of little feet, if you will.
So some of the struggles we were seeing definitely were handling. Like I said, it could be painful at times when we were working on those stretches. And on top of that, they're cats. So being restrained is not fun for a cat, whether or not it's painful or not. They just don't like being held down. Anyone who owns a domestic cat knows that. Tigers are no different. So, you know, for a lot of the stretching and the warm water compressions, they were on their back with their legs in the air and having to be held in that position for a while. You know, usually 30 minutes to an hour in that position. So there was some struggles there with them trying to wiggle their way out, a lot of vocalizations, a lot of attempting to nip. We did eventually have to get muzzles just to keep us safe. It gives them something to think about too. They're more distracted by the muzzle than actually our fingers or anything. The little girl we named Rosie, unfortunately, the first month she's still out in the habitat. When we were working with her, she just wanted to keep dragging herself. So we were really concerned that she was one that was either going to require a surgery, 2 surgeries. Potentially we couldn't fix her. So that was scary. So we did put a bit more time and effort into her treatment, and you know, she ended up with more exercises and more stretches, and we got to a point where we actually splinted her all the time. If she wasn't in therapy, getting her legs worked and exercised, she was in splints. Mainly because she needed to build up her abdominal strength. We would see her crawling and just dragging her back legs behind her in the habitat, and that just, if she wouldn't build the strength up, if she refused to do that, there was no way we were going to save her. So by putting those splints on, it gave her support to where she could actually put weight on her hind limbs and keep herself up. That, you know, sorry, now that I get emotional, those first couple times when she was actually walking on her own, it was a good day. Ooh, sorry.
When I see those cubs running and playing, it brings tears to my eyes. A true miracle happened here within that time frame that we were taking care of those babies, and she allowed us to do that, and that was, now when I see them, it's just a thrill to see them running and playing and growing.
Wow, that's, I mean, we know that we're an amazing team, but it kind of seems like a dream or a nightmare that we went through. with them. So, and to see them out there, and they look like normal tiger cubs running and playing with their mom. It's a miracle.
Yeah, man, I mean, your heart could explode. It's amazing. I went down to say hi. Everyone came running over, and that's what I did. I played with them. I ran up the hill and they chased me. It's the best feeling in the world.